Morning, everybody. Thanks for your time this morning. I appreciate it. Um, sure. I think there's one truth that we can share and that all of us know, and that is life is hard. Yeah? Who of you can agree to that? But it's just amazing how even in that space, we grew up in a life where we were told that in order for you to be successful, you've got to do it. You've got to make it. It's all up to you. So we go through life and do whatever we can to achieve something, to be better, to be successful. All right. So we even get told, it is all up to you. Just go out there and do your best. Okay. And these are the 5 steps that you need to follow in order to be successful. To be happy, just follow these 4 steps or principles in your life, Just wake up every single morning and just think of something that you're grateful for and your life will be better. All right? So how's that turning out for you? and that's what I did. I mean, my whole life, we all just want to be accepted and feel that we are important and be good enough. And we do whatever we can to try and achieve that. To be in that space, whether it's trying to be successful in life with having a lot of money or a big title, because then people will like me, I'll be important and they'll value me. Or if I can just be great in that sport, then like I did, then all the girls will like me, because, and at least then I'll have friends. And then life happens. And we all know that life doesn't always turn out the way that we plan it to. Correct? But then we try again, and we try again, and we try harder, and we try something new. So we go to the seminar, or so this preaching, maybe I'll get the recipe there. How to change my life and make things better, to be successful. Or we go and we pray. Don't we like doing that? When things aren't going well, Jesus, please come help me. And, if you could just change this and make this happen. Don't we do that? Because we've got the picture in our heads of what our life needs to look like in order to be happy, to be successful. Because what is it that we're actually after? Happiness and just, man, in my marriage, if I can just have peace, okay? Or with my children, if I can just have peace in that relationship, at work, with my boss and my peers, I'm just so hunger after peace. Today I'm going to talk to you about how do you find that peace that surpasses all understanding that Paul spoke about? Because wouldn't that just be awesome? Because we think we come to church or we sit at home and read the Bible or we pray and when we say amen, we feel like we're filled with peace. Oh, thank you, Jesus. Until you just get that next WhatsApp message and all of a sudden your peace is gone. Or my wife comes to me, Olivia, we need to talk this afternoon, please. And dear. My peace is gone. Okay? So what's happening that our peace is so situational? That's not what it should be like. That's not what we hunger after. But that's what I did in life. I was seeking that affirmation and being good enough. And I did everything I can in business and in life. And sometimes I achieved it and sometimes I didn't. It was up and down. I'm just looking for those recipes. And in trying to seek after all of that, doing it in my own power and my own strength and having to do it myself, I even got to the place where, again, just looking for that affirmation, I started mountain biking. I loved it. For me, my default always to be, when I experienced stress in my life, was to exercise. So I started mountain biking. And I eventually had an accident. So this picture was taken the day I was released from hospital. So my whole skull burst out in the side of my face. My whole face burst open, my neck. Medically, they couldn't explain how I survived this. I was 2 days in ICU fighting for my life. And then miraculously, my healing, 4 days later, I walked out of the hospital. But not for the first time that I walked out of the hospital. Actually, after I came out of ICU, they put me in a room with 2 other guys, but I didn't know about it. So when I came to it the first time, I didn't realize what was going on. And I had all these drains and pipes in me and this little, that little dress they give you that you've got on. And I didn't know where I was, but I didn't want to be here. So I just got up and I pulled everything out of me and got out of this little dress thing, and naked I walked out of the hospital. Early hours of the morning. So the guy there at the front just stopped me and said, "No, but this can't be like this." So they put me in a private room so they could lock the door. But we're not going to go into the detail of all of that. Because what they realized, and they came to find out that I also lost my short-term memory and my feelings and emotions was gone. So I was like a little goldfish. Every 20 seconds, everything was brand new to me. Okay? So, but that's for another day. Maybe we can talk about that if you come tomorrow night and we can ask some questions. But after this accident, I came to realize that I need to change my life. I was always in the place where when things went wrong, I felt sorry for myself. Poor me. How could this be happening to me again? Or why could this be happening to me? Why this happening? And you always find someone or something to blame. Don't we just love that? To make ourselves feel better? Okay? But I came to realize that that's not going to change life. I need to take responsibility. I needed to change. And how did I need to change? My character. Fruits of the Spirit. And that's how I went about life, and I realized I needed to change, and I started building in my character and changed my character, and I even in my business built into my biblical principles of character into my business. And everything started going so much better in my life, and I eventually got married to Leon and had two awesome little boys, and we just love living life together, spending time together. And it's not that it always was easy. We had challenges in that process. So we lost our first two babies. Just 2 weeks after we got married, suddenly, out of the blue, Leon's father, my wife's father got cancer, and 2 weeks later he died. Okay, I lost my work. We were living off my wife's little salary, and then she got retrenched. So we went through a lot. But then things really started going well also. And I was enjoying life with my family. Isn't this one of the most amazing things in life? That the most important thing in life and the most important thing to life is the one thing that we never, ever even think about. And that's the next breath you're going to take. Before I said that, who of you were thinking about your next breath? No one. Okay? Isn't that crazy? We just expect that it's going to be there. Isn't that crazy? You know what is sad that I came to realize as well? That's how we treat the most important relationships in our life as well. Our kids, our spouses. We just expect they're going to be there. So if I have an issue with them, I'll deal with that later. You know? It's their fault that I feel like this now. Until that very thing gets threatened. Then all of a sudden it becomes the most important thing to you. All your attention, focus, everything goes there. And we all came to experience this in 2020 and 21. What happened then? We all remember COVID. So I was this picture-perfect person of when I were to get COVID, I was healthy and fit, that I was just going to be like a little sniff nose and cough and everything will be fine. So when I tested positive for COVID on the 20th of September 2021, my words to my wife that day was, "Oh, finally, at least now I can get it over and done with." Of course, weren't you all just there? We were just waiting. When is it my turn? When am I getting COVID? You just get a little, sore throat. Oh, do I have COVID? You get tested. You get a little sniff nose. Oh, do I have COVID? You get tested because we were just waiting. When is it my turn? So I was just glad to get it and hopefully get it over and done with. And then 28th September, I took the last bed in ICU. And at that point of time, I didn't know about anything with regards to COVID and oxygen and how all of that works. And I thought, oh, hey, I've got COVID now. They got me into ICU and I thought still, I'm going to be fine. Because don't we live that way? That we're going to live forever? Everything's always going to happen to someone else. It's not going to happen to me. Don't we just do that? And then my third night in ICU, lying there, still thinking, on Friday, it's my eldest boy Lucas' birthday. I'll be home. Because surely this will just come and go. And then just after 3 that morning, all of a sudden I just started struggling to breathe. I was on oxygen, all of this, but not realizing what it's doing to me and what's happening in my body. And all of a sudden I just started to struggle to breathe. And as I struggled to breathe, my oxygen saturation levels dropped and the alarms are going off and the nurses rush towards you to come and help you. And as that was happening, all of a sudden I just saw this image, this vision of a truck driving towards me with a load of sand on it, and came and dumped a load of sand on top of me. And as they came to try and settle me and get me sorted out and stabilize me, I was fighting to get out from underneath this heap of sand. And finally I got out and they stabilized me and I was breathing again. And I was lying there, man, absolutely knackered and tired and spent. And I thought, oh wow, geez, what was that? What's happening here? And then a few minutes later, all of a sudden, I started to breathe again, I struggled to breathe more intensely. And I just saw this truck driving towards me again, but this time with a bigger heap of sand on top of it. And dumped this heap of sand on top of me, and I was fighting to get out. The alarms are going off, and the sisters rush towards me and try to stabilize me again. And I'm fighting. Eventually, I get out of this heap of sand, and they get me stabilized, and I'm just lying there, and I'm absolutely done. And as I was lying there this time, I just knew that tonight I was going to die. It's amazing how you just get this absolute knowing that it's going to happen, and there's absolutely nothing that I can do about it. Nothing. And then the next minute, I just struggled to breathe again, and this time so intensely. I just remember the main sister running towards me and grabbing me by the arm, and she said, Mr. Koornhof, we're not going to let this happen tonight. Work with me. Please work with me. And I saw this truck driving towards me again, but this time with such a massive heap of sand, and dumped that on top of me. And I was fighting to get out, and they were trying to stabilize me. And all of a sudden, everything just went black. The last I saw on the monitor on the screen was 16 minutes past 3 in the morning. And in that process of them trying to stabilize me, trying to get me back, because then I stopped breathing, I went into respiratory failure, and everything was gone. So they were like doing everything, moving me around to try and get things sorted out. They were pumping 60 liters of oxygen into my lungs, hoping to get enough oxygen through for my saturation levels to rise, for my organs to start functioning again. But while all that was happening, and everything went black, the next minute, everything around me were just blue skies. And I was in this glass box, just floating off. And I realized in that moment that I had died and I'm off to heaven. But I couldn't accept this. That's not the picture that I had for my life. I've got my wife and my 2 boys back home. I want to spend life with them and have time with them still. This is not how I was supposed to be. And I'm kicking this glass box and hitting it and trying to break it because I've got to get out of this thing. I've got to get back. And the next minute, I just heard this voice in this presence that came and said, "Who do you think I am?" And I realized it must be Jesus, but I'm just busy here, man. I've got to get this sorted out. I've got to fix this, and I'm hitting this box and kicking it and again trying to break it and giving everything I have. And this voice just came again and said, and this time it was louder, not like a speaker that turns louder. It was the power in the voice that just sort of really magnified and said, "Who do you think I am?" And the power of that voice just knocked me flat on the floor in that box. And I just responded and I said, "I know you, Jesus." And he said, "No, I'm not." And I just thought, oh dear. He said, "I'm Jesus Almighty." And he said, "Johan, but that means nothing to you anymore. My almightiness means nothing to you because you've become so familiar with me. so used to me, that you treat me and speak to me and speak about me like you speak to your friends and family. And he said, even if I speak to you like I spoke to Job, that I've got the power in my hands to let the sun go up or go down. I've got the power to let the waves break and tell them where they can go and can't go any further. Even if I were to tell you that, it would not even move you with my authority and power that I have, because you've become so used to me. Then he said, Johan, every single breath that you are fighting for right now, it's a gift that I've got in my hands to give to you or to take away. Do I have your attention now? And the next minute, his presence just went away. And as I was standing there, actually at that point still lying there, I found myself at the place where all of us are going to be one day. What we saw on display in the last 2 nights and tonight again, you don't pass away and go to heaven or hell. You're going to give account for your life first. We are all going to be there. Before that decision is made, you're going to give account for your life. And as I was there, I just had this one image after the next image and vision coming past, showing me in my life where I turned my back on Jesus. Every single time I lived in disobedience to Jesus. One after the other. And while that was happening, I just had this absolute knowing come into me and upon me that I'm not going to heaven. I'm going to hell. In the spiritual realm, when you're there, there's absolute clarity. There's no gray areas or doubt or wondering about something. It's so crystal clear. There's absolute knowing that I was going to go to hell. No doubt, nothing that I can do about it now. I had my opportunity and I blew it. The most intense thing about being in that space, not for one split second, that I think about my cars, my home, my bank accounts at home or anything. Not for a split second. The entire time, I was only aware and mindful of eternity. That's all. Just being mindful, aware of eternity. And then knowing that I'm going to go to hell. And I'm only fully aware of eternity. When they speak about in the Bible the gnashing of teeth, that's an understatement. Eternity. And the next moment, Jesus' presence came back and he said, Johan, if you deny me on earth, I'll deny you before my Father in heaven. And he just confirmed to me what I knew, that I was going to go to hell and not to heaven. And the next moment, Jesus explained to me, Johan, the path through the narrow gate that goes to heaven is not what you think it is. Because I was living a life at home thinking that I'm this perfect Christian. My whole business was built on biblical principles. I was living a life of godly character most of the time. I was serving on the church leadership team. I was a good person. Giving my best. And yet here I'm going to hell. And Jesus said that path is a path of total surrender to me. Not how we surrender with conditions. Jesus, I give my life to you, and when I get up, but just don't take my golf away. I still want to play golf, okay? Or whatever other habits you have, just don't ask me to stop watching this series on television, or whatever that might be for you. Don't ask me to stop smoking, or whatever that might be for you. We've got our conditions, because we think that's okay. That's just normal. That's just being a human, isn't it? That's just living life. Total surrender. And from that place of total surrender, in other words, my picture for your life, not yours. My will be done, not yours. And from that place, to live in total obedience to me. Every moment of every single day. If you live life that way, then you'll go to heaven. And I was like, but Jesus, I'm just a human being. I'm going to make mistakes. Don't we just love that? I'm not perfect. Ne? Hello? And he said to me, Johan, your mistakes, your sin doesn't bother me. Just hold on for a moment, because I later understood what he said by that. He said, that's not what I'm looking at. It's not the tick box of your behavior. What I'm looking at is the attitude of your heart. The attitude of your heart. And you know how I realize how powerful the attitude is of your heart? And we don't like this. Because an attitude of your heart, there's no grey space. It's either 100% yes or no. There's no 90% or just when it suits me or when it feels good, or I will love my wife as long as she, make sure that there's food when I get home, and etc., etc. No. Always. Attitude of your heart. In other words, what he said is, you need to have this attitude of obedience, that everything inside of you, every single moment of every single day just desires to be obedient to me. In everything that you do and say. That's what I'm talking about. That's the power of attitude. Not just when it suits you or on a Sunday at church, or always. He said, Johan, if you're willing to live like that, I'll send you back. He said, but take your time before you decide, because I can see your heart. Whether you want to go back just to be with your boys and your wife, or if you're truly going to live like this. Because I want you to live like this and then go and share this testimony to wake Christians up. That was his words, to wake Christians up. And when I thought about it and came to think about it, and I said, yes, I will. He sent me back. And as he sent me back, I saw myself lying underneath this heap of sand, still fighting to get out. But this time, there was hundreds, thousands of people digging to get me out of the sand. And Jesus said, Johan, look. See all the people that is praying for you. Isn't that amazing? What I came to learn later was that very night, just after 10 o'clock, back home, when my wife went to bed, she walked past my eldest son, Lucas then, he was 5 years old. She walked past his room and she heard him talking. And she thought, dude, you're supposed to be sleeping. And she just went and stood by the door to listen to him. And as she stood there listening to him, she heard him saying and praying, asking Jesus to please send his dad back home. 5-year-old boy. Prayer of a child. What does your relationship look like with your kids? What example are you giving your kids that they would speak to Jesus? What time are you spending with them as a family together in the presence of Jesus at home? that is something that will be a default reaction from your kids when necessary. Yes, I made a lot of mistakes, but by the grace of God, that is one thing that I did right up until that stage in my life. And in that moment, as he sent me back, what happened in the hospital, all of a sudden, my oxygen saturation levels just shot up. And I started breathing again. And they got me back. In that moment, the specialist had two choices. They could either put me on a ventilator and induce the coma, like everybody in the ICU was at that point. I was the only conscious person. But they knew if they were going to do that, they're going to lose me and never get me back. They knew that would be the end. The other choice was to keep me conscious. But they knew that keeping me conscious, the way I was breathing and my condition that I was in, it is not possible to continue living like that for more than a few minutes, actually. If I can just give you an example or a taste of what it was like for me, I was breathing. When you get home, just take a little straw. And maybe in your house, just run up and down the garden in your house, the corridor for a few seconds, just for your heart rate to get up to about 120, 140. And once you do that, you're going to stop. You put the straw in your mouth, close your nose and try to breathe. You'll maybe be able to sustain that for a few seconds. That is how I was breathing. But with the level of my oxygen saturation levels being down, you need to do that on top of Mount Everest. And see how you can sustain that. But they knew at least if they do that, they'll give me a chance to live and see what happens. Which they did. But when I was lying there in ICU afterwards, this is the one verse that came to mind that a spiritual mentor of mine sent me. Just read Matthew 7, 21 to 23. And think, have you ever read this verse? And read it for what it's actually written? Just look at this. Not everyone, and this is Jesus speaking. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? Just listen to what he's saying here. He's talking about high-level Christians because they've prophesied in his name. They've healed people in his name. Okay? He's not speaking about non-believers. He was speaking to his disciples here. And he's saying, and then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. In other words, you who aren't obedient to me. Let that just sink in for a moment, people. Then I understood how I came to find myself to be in that place when I gave accounts for my life, that I was found wanting. So if you were to think about your life and you read that, where are you at the moment? Getting uncomfortable in your seat? Is it confronting you a bit? If it does, what an amazing place to be. John 16:33 talks about that in this life you'll have trials and tribulations. But be of good cheer. We all know that verse, don't we? After 9 days in ICU, they managed to get me stabilized enough to get me out of ICU into the high care unit. But I was placed in the high care unit in isolation. Like a clinical room, you there, no one else can get in apart from who has to, covered with 4 layers of clothes. When they get out, they take all the clothes off, put in a bag, and that bag gets burned, and you just lay in that room. My first night, and I thought, now life is going to get better. Finally, I'm out of ICU. things have gotten better, so it's going to turn around, and now I'm going to eventually soon go home. The first night in the high care unit, all of a sudden, I had a cough episode. Now, I'm on oxygen, struggling to breathe, and I start coughing. Then it's impossible for you to breathe while you're coughing, right? So I get this cough episode, and I can't breathe, and I press my emergency button, and no one is coming. It's in a private hospital. The night shift, no one pitches up. And I'm like, what? How can this be? I need to get this sorted. I need to do something. I get myself out of bed, crawl on the floor into the corridor, and I just scream, help! And all of a sudden a nurse walks down and pitches up and says, hey, can I help you? I'm like, serious? She looks at me, she says, do you want oxygen or medication? I'm like, dude, seriously? And I just shout, both! And she disappears and never returns. I'm lying on the floor, dying, can't breathe, coughing, and giving my everything. And the next minute, Jesus says to me, Johan, what did I tell you? Surrender. Stop trying to be in control. Surrender. I'm in control, not you. Why do we go through trials and tribulations? Why does Jesus allow that? It's for the truth of who and what He is to settle in your heart. Once you go through trials and tribulations and challenges, that is when the true colors of your heart are shown. Yeah, hello. Someone can be so nice, and you think, oh, what an amazing person. And then almost something happens that they don't like. Oh, whoa, where did that come from? And yeah? In your own life? So what happened there? I was given the opportunity by Jesus to choose the truth. And He said, Johan, I told you, surrender. Surrender. And in that moment I was lying there and I said, Jesus, I know. I surrender. You in control, not me. You've got this. So this is where you decide that I'm going to die, your will be done, not mine. You in control, not me. If you decide that I need to live, you are almighty. You can do anything. So I surrender to you. For the first time in my life, I fully surrender to Jesus. Whether I die or not, I fully surrender to Him. Okay, Jesus, you've got this. I surrender. And the minute I did that for the first time, I experienced what all of us are so yearning for. The peace that surpasses all understanding. And the minute that peace came over me, all of a sudden, I just relaxed and I started breathing again. Got myself eventually back into bed. And then about 45 minutes later, a sister pitched up, I heard there's something wrong. Can we help you? And I said, don't worry, it's okay. Let's quickly read that bit in Philippians 4:7. It says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds. Listen to this. Through Jesus Christ. So where does that peace come from? Only in Jesus. Not in your own strength and power, only in Jesus. Only when you surrender to Jesus. Knowing and believing with your entire heart that He is almighty, that He is in control, and that He's got this. Only then. It's written. But we always try and do it in our own power. I've got to fix this. I've got to sort this out. You know what we do in that process? We go and say, Jesus, just sit there, I've got this. I'll sort it out. I'll tell my wife what needs to change in our marriage to make this work and be better. But prior to that, I went on my knees. Jesus, please help me in my marriage. Please sort this out. Help us to love each other again. We say amen, and then we put Jesus there, and I'll go and sort it out. But there I was with this truth in my heart that He's almighty, that He's in control. And I surrendered fully for the first time, and I experienced that peace. 3 nights later, 10 o'clock the night, all of a sudden my entire upper body went into spasms, front and back. Who of you have ever had a spasm in your back? When you have that spasm, you try to breathe, it just knocks the air out of you, okay? There I was lying, my entire body in spasm, front and back, on oxygen, struggling to breathe, and now that's happening. This time I pressed the button, and all of a sudden 6, 7, 8 nurses, this time rushed to me. Now I can think I was lying there, but this time the truth, because the truth settled in my heart. The minute that happened, I instantly went into that space of surrender. Jesus, you've got this. I didn't panic, wasn't anxious for nothing. So when the nurses got to me, they looked at me and they saw my entire body was in all the spasms, and they couldn't believe, how are you so calm? How can you sit here breathing like this when this is happening? So they picked me up, they had me hanging like this, and I'm just hanging there and in all peace. Took them 45 minutes closely for the specialist to come and inject me with medication for my muscles to relax, but in all that time I was just fine. Why? Because that truth was in my heart that He's got this, He's in control. Nothing and no one can take that away from me. No circumstance can take that away from me because He's in control. Whatever is happening to me, He allowed it, so He's in control. He knows what He's doing. Just hear what I said, people. The minute you live from this place of total surrender and obedience, Jesus said, nothing can happen to you unless I allow it. Just get that. When you live in the other part, where you live in your own strength, your own power, even though you're a Christian, anything can happen to you. But when you're in this space, Jesus said, nothing can happen to you unless I allow it. Isn't that where you want to be? When Pilate told Jesus, you've got to explain yourself now. Come on. And Jesus said, no. Because nothing will happen to me unless my Father allows it. You think you're making the choices, you've got no clue. Even with Job, the devil had to go and get permission to touch him. Isn't that where you want to live? Knowing that whatever is happening to me, He's allowed it, so He's in control, He's got this. There's your peace. All of a sudden now, my prayers change. My prayer is not, Jesus, please help me. Please get me out of the situation or free me from this. No, it's like, Jesus, I know you've allowed this. Show me why. Show me why. 9 out of 10 times will probably be because there's still something in you that you need to die to. Surrender to Him. For holiness to get greater in you. Get closer to Jesus. And the minute that happens, the situation changes. Because that's the desire of Jesus, just to get you closer to Him. That's the pruning that you spoke about. He can make things happen that we cannot explain with what we know. He's in control. My responsibility was not trying to control the outcome, because that's what we do. Our responsibility is simply to be obedient and to surrender. The outcome is His. Okay? But we want to control the outcome, and when it doesn't happen, that's when we get disappointed. That's when we get frustrated. But the outcome is His, not ours. Our focus constantly just needs to be on surrender and obedience. So what my day looked like in hospital, let's say it started 4 in the morning, but it didn't because I hardly ever slept. My 9 days in ICU, I didn't close an eye for a second. I was awake all the time, which also medically is not possible. And in the high care unit, if I had 2 to 3 hours of broken sleep in 24 hours, that was a lot. I was like sitting, lying up straight, because I couldn't lie flat, because how my lungs hurt from that. Lying flat was just excruciating. So, but 4 o'clock, let's say it started 4 o'clock, because 4 o'clock in the morning, they came into my room to draw blood. Okay? Sometimes twice a day, they had to draw blood for testing with the amount of inflammation and everything that's going on. Eventually, my arteries would just collapse and shut closed when they try and do it. So they had to then start withdrawing blood out of my wrists. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. That's sore, because they can't see an artery to put the needle into. They put the needle into your wrist, and then they start looking around there for a needle, for artery that they can find, and all of a sudden they see the blood coming to the tube, and they just keep it there for the tube to fill up, and they take it out. And now they can't close it. So you start just bleeding internally, and it swells up, and it's all blue purple, and the next day it's the other wrist. And so that's what happened 4 o'clock in the morning. And then about 6 o'clock, I got an injection to my stomach for blood thinners. At 7 a.m. with the IV, I had got 250 milliliters of bottled pain medication, on top of other tablets that I took for pain medication as well during the day. 8 a.m. I had a cortisone injection, 6 p.m. injection again in my stomach, 9 p.m. again IV medication. At about 6 weeks into my journey in hospital in isolation, I stopped counting about 148 needles that was pressed into me at that point of time. On top of that happening, now my lungs were shot. And with all the inflammation, it causes phlegm to form in your lungs. And that comes out. So usually you'll experience when you're a bit sick, you get phlegm, you cough it out, boom, and it's fine, and you carry on. I had literally, basically no, but there was some oxygen in my lungs. If I tried to blow my nose, I couldn't feel anything coming out of my nose even. So now this phlegm comes loose and it sits in my throat and I start to suffocate. So I get this cough episode and I'm coughing and coughing. So what happens now, all of a sudden from that energy that I'm spending, my oxygen saturation levels drops into the 60s. They refer to that as being in cyanosis. So about 2.5 minutes of that and you're gone. Okay? So that's happening. And I'm trying coughing and coughing for 15 to 20 minutes it usually takes. And all of a sudden, boom, it comes out. And it looks like that. Then it comes out and I'm lying there now fighting for my life to get my breath back again, get my saturation levels up. Eventually I get it done. That happened every hour, once every 2 hours. Every single day, every single night. On top of the rest that was happening. So that was how I was constantly fighting for my life every single day. I was in the high care unit and ICU in total for just over 10 weeks. Okay? Eventually from lying back, your body starts to eat away at your muscles. They call it muscle dystrophy. And that's what my legs look like, my calf. It's just like loose skin hanging around there. So if you go through all of this, if you go through some difficulty and challenges in your life, how do you go about trusting in Jesus, that He's in control? How do you do that? What makes this so difficult? What makes it so difficult to believe that Jesus is who He said He is and that He's in control? If you go and read what happened in Genesis 3, 4 to 5, that is where Satan came to Eve and tried to convince her to eat of the fruit. And there's 3 things, 3 messages that through what he spoke about, he tried to settle in her heart. And those 3 things were that Jesus' word is not true, that His character cannot be trusted, and that you can also be God. And when she opened that door for that to happen, that's when everything changed. So where in our lives does this play off? That Jesus' word is not true? That His character is not trustworthy, and that you can be God. Let's see how that plays off in my life. So I experience a challenge and a difficulty. And I come to Jesus and I say, Jesus, please help me with this. help this to change. And because I've got this picture in my head of what it should look like for me to be happy again and successful. And I ask him for this picture, and I say, amen. And I'm now expecting this is going to happen. And it doesn't happen. All of a sudden, now I'm disappointed. So in other words, Jesus' word is not true. That he said that, you will live in total abundance when you believe in me. So that's not true. So I can't trust his character that he said that he loves me. So what happens now? Now that it didn't happen what I asked him, now I've got to go and fix this. I've got to sort this out. Ne? In other words, I'm God. I can give you a long list of how that plays out in my life, where I decide to take control of my kids, my marriage, my personal life, my work life. Hello? In other words, I don't truly believe that Jesus is who he said he is. So what makes you a Christian? What makes you believe that you will go to heaven? Oh, because I believe in Jesus. Didn't we just sing that earlier? Well, guess what? So does Satan. He also believes in Jesus and his demons. So what makes you different to Satan then? Hello? You surrender to Christ. What does that look like? If I do surrender to Christ, go and read John 14:15, what he says. If you love me, you will obey me. If you love me, you will obey me. Listen to this. His love is conditional. Hello? Oh dear, Johan, how can you say that? When you read something anywhere in life, you say, if this happens, then that'll happen. What do you call that? It's a condition. If you obey me, then I will know that you love me. It's conditional. And Jesus said, I'll see it in your fruit. Again, which Andrew said this morning, if you don't bear fruit, I will cut you off and throw you in the fire. Hello? So a true disciple, people, is not merely to believe Jesus exists, it's about believing that Jesus is almighty. He's real. He is the Alpha and the Omega. He is the beginning and the end. And he is in control. And then, from that space, to live a life of total surrender and obedience. That's a disciple of Jesus. Just get that, people. And knowing that I belong to Jesus, not that he belongs to me. But isn't that how we live so often? He belongs to me. I go to him, ask him, Jesus, do this, please. Do that. Seriously?
And expects us to follow him.
Amen. But also when he was asked, Jesus, why did you die and have to be resurrected? Why did you have to go through all of that? We think, it's because he loves us so much. You know what his first words was? His first reason? For me to take my position of almightiness, of authority back. It wasn't for you and me. It was about him. It was about Jesus. For him to take his position of authority back. Jesus Almighty. Just look at the command. Twice in the Bible we hear this. The command of Jesus is also the same thing that creates his judgment over us. This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. There he speaks into Jesus' character. I'm pleased with my Son. And listen to the commandment. What does he say? Listen to him. Obey him. So you know what's going to happen when you get judged, when you stand in heaven and you need to give account for your life? You know what God's going to ask you? What did you do with my Son? Because that's the commandment I gave you. Obey him. So I'm going to ask you, what did you do with my Son? Did you obey him? Yes or no? What does the fruit of your life look like? Do you live a life in which you obey Jesus? What does that look like practically in my life? How can I make this practical? Every action, every word, before you say or do anything, you know what question you need to ask yourself? Will this honor Jesus? Will this honor Jesus? And if you get the answer no, and you do it, seriously? How can you say that you love him? So if I'm going to have an argument with my wife and raise my voice, will that bring honor to Jesus? Yes or no? Will that give honor to Jesus? Yes or no? It's that simple. It doesn't matter what age you are, what religion you are, what sex you are, what culture you are. Everybody's answer was exactly the same. Isn't that amazing? Because he laid those truths on our heart and he created all of our hearts the same. We were created in his image. So therefore, when you ask that question before you do or say anything, everybody's answer will be the same. But yet then I do raise my voice. Or if Jesus tells you, don't go out with your friends tonight. And you think, oh, what am I going to do? I mean, that's just me going out with my friends. You're disobeying him. So listen here, people. If you go out tonight with your friends and that's fine, but then you drink too much, or you're at home and you drink too much, will that honor Jesus? When you're with your friends watching the football game or the rugby game and you're having a few beers and you have one too much that you're not sober anymore, will that honor Jesus? Hello? That's how simple and practical and real walking in the footsteps of Jesus is every single day. But here's the thing. You can't now decide to raise my voice to my wife and still call myself a Christian that I love Jesus. You either need to change your action or your testimony, because those two can't walk together. It's simple, people. Because if you choose to do that, then Matthew 7:23 becomes part of your life, becomes a reality in your life. It is that simple. Not my words, it's written. He's a jealous God. But here's the thing. The minute you do choose to live like that, all of a sudden you experience the opposite of what you are going through, what's going through in your mind now. All of a sudden you experience that peace that surpasses all of a sudden. All of a sudden you are liberated. You feel free when you do that. Life becomes a joy regardless of your circumstances, because you know he's in control and he's got this. That's the truth. So that's all I focused on during all that time in the hospital, those 10 weeks. Just to be surrendered all the time and obedient in everything that he asked of me and everything that I did. How I responded to people, treated people. And you know what's amazing? How you get this law of reciprocity. You know that? So all of a sudden when you treat people kindly, they can't help but wanting to be kind to you as well. Okay? Isn't that true? Hello? So because of that experience people had of me, knowing what I was going through, that I'm supposed to die with every single breath that I should not be able to take, but yet I was kind to them, spoken to their life when I can. They actually, about just 2 weeks prior to going out of the hospital, they made an exception for the first time in the history in the hospital of COVID, and they allowed my boys to come and visit me. And
well, wouldn't you expect it, because it's like anything, if people go in hospital, they have to recover before they are allowed to have people in to see them?
mostly, yeah. So what happened, the day I was released out of hospital on oxygen, they had oxygen installed in my house. So when I was stable enough, they had oxygen installed in my house. My specialist said, so I can at least go home and die at home and see my family instead of dying in the hospital. Okay? So that was the day they released me, and I was on mobile oxygen there, but they had permanent oxygen installed in my house. And but as I was leaving my room in the wheelchair, and when I got into the corridor, that corridor was lined with nurses and medical staff and specialists who was moved by my story. And not just that, but had stories they shared of me of how my journey had changed their lives. How some of them found Jesus in that process. So sometimes you are going to go through trials and tribulation and challenge, and it's got nothing to do with you. You don't have to die to something in your life to get closer to Jesus. No, it's not even got anything to do with you. It's for someone else. I was going through a lot of that, and the time it took to go through that, not for me, but for other people. But it's being obedient, because then Jesus can use you. Life becomes so much easier when you realize it's not about you. 172 days later of living like that, and then at home, I started breathing better one morning. Took the oxygen off, was still breathing, phoned my specialist, went for a CT scan. When I walked into his practice, he sat there crying. And I thought, oh dear, what's going on now? And he just looked at me and he said, Johan, it's the most beautiful miracle that I've seen in my entire life. The fibrosis is gone. It's not happened in the history of medicine. It's not possible. But Jesus. So in all that time, I wasn't there every single day praying, Jesus, please help me, please save me, please free me from this. I wasn't that. I was just focused on total surrender and being obedient in everything that I did. Because the outcome was His. He's in control of that. And you know how liberating that is? Because now I don't have to try. I don't have to give all the attention to that. I don't have to get being burnt out with all this effort and whatever. No, it's Jesus. He's in control. Trying to make all the plans of how I'm going to fix this, how I'm going to sort this out, how I'm going to convince that person to please do this. No, it's Jesus. You know what you get to realize in that point of time when you realize the responsibility for me is just to be obedient and surrender? And not to be in control? You know what the big question then becomes? Are you hearing His voice? Because if you can't hear His voice, how can you ever be obedient to Him? Oh dear. Oh dear. And then to hear His voice, what are you doing to make that happen? What does your time look like in the day? When you come to the end of the day and you look back at your day, can I see that Jesus was your first love in how you spent your time? Oops. My sheep hear my voice, and they follow me. If you can't hear his voice, how can you follow him? It's impossible. Impossible. But here's the beautiful thing, what I realized. After being a Christian my entire life, I at this point realized that I'm still a baby to be able to hear his voice. I need to drink my mother's milk. But you know what the beauty in that is? That is where his almightiness comes in. Because now he sees the attitude of my heart, that everything in me just wants to be obedient. And I said, Jesus, in this situation, I feel and I experience and I believe this is what I need to do. But if I'm not hearing your voice perfectly well here, please close the doors. And he's almighty and he will do it. Because he said, if you live like that, I will not let you fall. I will not let you fall. Even if you make a mistake, I will not let you fall, because I see the attitude of your heart, that you did it from a place of total surrender and wanting to be obedient. And in walking that journey, every single step of the day, all of a sudden, I grow in maturity to hear his voice. In spending time with him. So, months later, actually more than a year, just a year ago, my specialist, after I also did something for him, he came back to me and he said, Johan, your second chance at life just keeps on giving life. And I thought, what a nice thing to say. And when I left, I was driving my car, I was thinking about what he said, and I realized, but isn't that what all of us should be doing? Do you realize that you don't have to go through what I did to get a second chance at life? Your next breath is your second chance at life, people. Just let that sink in. It's a gift from Jesus. So your next breath is your second chance at life. When you breathe it in, it gives life to you. But you can't just hold it in. It needs to come out. And when it comes out, what do you do with it? Are you going to give life or take life? Hello? Life and death lies in the power of the tongue. So Jesus gives you life. What a gift. And with that second chance that you're getting to life, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to give life or take it? With the next word that I speak towards my wife or my kids when we leave here, is going to give them life in that relationship, or is it going to take life? Hello. Hello. Because for every single word and every single deed, you're going to give account. Was it in obedience to me or not? Did it honor me or not? The fact that you've given your life and you believe in Jesus means nothing. Absolutely nothing. If you don't live in total surrender and obedience every moment of every single day. You're never going to be perfect. That's not what it's about. I'm not perfect. But it's the attitude of my heart. The minute I do something that is sinful and where I should change, He makes me aware of it. I'm like, Jesus, please forgive me. And I repent from it. And it never happens again. And I've just grown closer to Him. Look at David. That's what I said. Child of my own heart. Did he make mistakes? Hello? But he never made it twice. Because the minute he was made aware of it, he was just falling flat before Jesus in all humility and awe and say, Jesus, please forgive me. When you are made aware of your sin, do you fall before Jesus like that in absolute humility and almost disgusting yourself that you did that and didn't realize it, but now you do and ask for forgiveness? And that'll never happen again. Is that how you live? And then when you do ask Him for forgiveness, to then go to the person or people who was affected by it and ask them for forgiveness as well? Because Jesus will always ask you to do that. But what we do, ask Jesus for forgiveness, but just please don't ask me to tell my wife or ask her. That's, no. So your next breath, people, is your second chance at life. What are you going to do with it? So start breathing life into your life and to everybody around you. Choose in everything that you do and say what gives honor to Jesus. It's that simple. Jesus knew he was working with people, so he had to make it so simple. Okay. I'm not saying it's easy because your pride and your ego comes in the way. You wanting to be in control comes into the way. But he's asking you to surrender that, to die to yourself and surrender to him. So speak life, people, into every single relationship around you so that you can have life. Not everybody's going to get a second chance like I did when you give account for your life. I did nothing to deserve it. So where you sit now, what has changed in your heart? Where you sit now, do you sit there with absolute peace and knowing that if your time will come this afternoon, because we're not in control of that. All of us sitting here know someone whose life just lost their life just like that. So why can't that be you? But we live like we're going to live forever, so I'll deal with that later. Yes, I hear what you're saying, Johan, but I'll deal with that later. Because I know I'll live tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the 10 years from now. You're not in control of that. So what are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? Where are you sitting? Where are you confronted? Where you're sitting right now? Because that choice will never be taken away from you. Jesus said, I give you the choice. And then he asks you, please choose life. Choose the truth. But it's your choice to make. It's your choice to make. So what choice are you going to make? What choice are you going to make? Because it is all about Jesus. It is all for Jesus. And it's all in Jesus. Nothing and no one else. No other stories, no other rituals or nothing else. It's just about Jesus. What are you going to do with my son? Jesus, I just come to you and I pray and I ask that every person sitting here, Jesus, will just be moved by the truth of you. Jesus, I pray that every person sitting here will experience a glimpse of your almightiness in a way that you know needs to take place in their heart so that they will be moved in total awe and humility to bow before you, Jesus, and give their lives to you and walk a life every single day, every single night that honors you, Jesus. And that by doing that, the fruits will just spread through their homes, will spread through the communities and the towns and affect other people because it's all about you. And I pray that every single person sitting here, Jesus, that know that they need to bow before you now and realizing that they think they've done it, but they've never done it. That they'll be moved to do it, Jesus. And that the churches where they find them in will be a place where they'll get to know more about you and the truth of you. Where they'll be able to grow closer to you through those churches and people that serves there. And that they will go and serve there. And that your will be done, Jesus. That they'll take the time to go and sit before you and wait on you to hear from you. Before they move. So that it can be from a place of obedience. Because if you call us, you provide. Because everything belongs to you, Jesus. That if you ask, we will obey. Because everything is yours. And then that peace that surpasses all understanding will be a place that they never ever want to leave. And that they'll guard their hearts with everything they have to remain there and live there and walk there with you, Jesus Almighty. Amen.